Buy 6, get a 10% discount. Buy 12 bottles, get a 20% discount, or they'll throw in an extra case of beer. Our two major newspapers in this state are saturated with alcohol advertising. And so is it any wonder that their campaigns, when it comes to dealing with the insidious problems that a saturation of alcohol can have, is entirely focused on the venues? And there's nothing, you won't read anything in either the Daily Telegraph or the Sydney Morning Herald dealing with one of the key problems in terms of encouraging alcohol abuse, which is the saturation advertising you'll find in both those papers. And so when you read the editorial, as you could probably pick up either paper and over the last 3 years read half a dozen editorials about the problem of alcohol in society. Each time those editorials ran in those papers, you could have also found 2, 3, 4 pages of full-page spreads promoting cheap bulk alcohol, bulk purchases of alcohol. And I note the interjection from the Honourable Peter Phelps, cheering that on. And it goes to show, and it just goes to show how insidious the alcohol advertising is. Now, the Greens do not support a prohibition on cellar-door advertising. Of course we need small producers in particular to be able to do cellar-door advertising, to advertise on the labels of their bottles, to advertise at the point of sale. Those things are necessary. We don't have a view of prohibition on alcohol. Indeed, we don't support the lockouts that we see on alcohol. And the idea that the only solution to the damage that alcohol causes is shutting bottle shops at 10 o'clock. Meanwhile, and I note that interjection, I agree with it. Meanwhile, they allow this pervasive alcohol advertising all across the spectrum. Social media, print media, electronic media, and then both major parties pretend that shutting bottle shops at 10 o'clock is really going to fix it. Well, I think we need to look much more deeply on that. I think this bill, whilst there are parts I disagree with, this bill at least allows us to have that discussion, to have the opportunity to hopefully raise the bar, if you like, for debate on alcohol. With those brief contributions, I'll leave the balance of the debate to other members of my party.
The government whip.
I move that debate on this motion be adjourned.
I want to hear that. On which private member's business takes place?
Yes. Don't need to.
Oh, is it?
Right. This goes on the pink for the next page.
The question is that debate on this bill be adjourned to the next sitting day. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Just before I report receipt of a message from the Legislative Assembly agreeing to the Council's amendments in the Land and Property Information Authorised Transaction Bill. The clerk will read the papers for granted. Order of the day.
Private members' business item number 981, outside the order of precedence, standing in the name of Mr Mallard relating to the 2016 Paralympians.
That's a big day.
Mr Deputy President.
The Honourable Shayne Mallard.
It's Shayne Day.
Two calls, I think.
981. 981.
We should hear you now.
Yeah, that's right. Excuse me while I get some water. Far more subdued presentation. Mr Deputy President, imagine growing up living with 5 brothers and sisters, all of whom are heavily involved in sports in one way or the other. For those of you who are parents or uncles or aunts or carers, you know the weekend in the car. You're familiar with the weekend in the car, travelling from football field to the netball court and then back to tennis or maybe hockey. It's almost a de facto part of the Australian dream that you basically become a weekend taxi service. And when you have kids, and look after kids who play sports. Weekdays for a kid of this type at school are filled with getting out of school as soon as you can on the oval at lunchtime to play some muck-around games, football, or maybe just like to run around the field. At age 13 or 14, or usually younger, you start representing your local area in your chosen sport, just like your older sisters or brothers have. And for you, Saturday mornings can't come around quick enough. Then, Mr Deputy President, at age 20, when you've just got your driver's licence so you can drive yourself to the games, You're told that you've got a rare degenerative disease which will over time slowly degrade your sight to about 30% by the time you are 35, and you will be rendered legally blind at the age of 40. And Mr Deputy President, that's not all. It will mean you will wear hearing aids for the rest of your life as your hearing also deteriorates. Well, that, Mr Deputy President, is Katie Kelly's story. But it's not her whole story. Imagine knowing this and slowly, as you get older, progressively losing your sight and still managing to achieve the following. Complete a bachelor's degree at Griffith University, get a master's degree from the University of Technology in Sydney, work in high-profile sports industry roles with brands like the National Rugby League, Melbourne Storm, ANZ Stadium, Newcastle Knights and Athletics New South Wales, do pro bono work as a media liaison officer for the Australian blind cricket team. And then while you do that, you continue to compete in able-bodied events like the New York Marathon, place first in the ITU World Para-Triathlon, get ranked number 13th in the world for para-triathlons, win a world championship title, and then, Mr Deputy President, win Australia's first gold medal in para-triathlon. Now that's Katie Kelly's story, but that's also the story of the Paralympics. Every single one of those athletes has a story like Katie's, overcoming hardship to win big, not just at the Paralympics, but in day-to-day life. I like the way Katie puts it in a recent interview she did after her win at the Chicago World Championships. She said, and I quote, "All my fellow athletes, some of them are amputees, some of them are in wheelchairs. The common thing we all have is, yeah, okay, there's a certain limitation we have, but there's obviously a lot of capabilities we do have, and it's just tapping into those things that you can do that matters." It's also telling that her stated career highlight before the Paralympic gold medal had nothing to do with her own individual success on the sports field. Instead, she says it was the honour and the atmosphere of sharing with the members, the players, the coaching staff and the management team of the Melbourne Storm and the success of their winning the NRL Grand Final in 1999. Now let me turn to Michellie Jones. In her post-match interview, that spirit of shared determination and success absolutely shines through, this post-Olympic winning. Except this time it's shared between Katie Kelly, who is sometimes KK, or the animal, and her sighted guide, Michellie Jones. I suggest members who are interested in Katie's and Michellie's story have a look at that interview. It's on YouTube. Because the affection these two athletes have for each other is a symbol of the kind of bonds that Paralympians can foster, and also the kind of relationship we should all have with those in the community who live with disabilities. Michellie, a 2-time world champion triathlete of her own, a silver Olympic gold medalist and Iron Woman in her own right, plays a role we too should play as community representatives, that of the enabler, the supporter of those with varying ability. Despite all the individual success one could hope for as an athlete, Michellie says in a reference to winning gold at the Paralympics alongside Katie that, quote, "This is so much better, because when I think of everything KK has been through, and to be able to be doing everything she's doing in such a short amount of time, to me, this is the best thing I have ever done." Michellie and Katie's attitude is indicative, I think, of the spirit that sport should always be played in, and I think it's a spirit that is especially strong amongst Paralympic athletes, para-athletes. Let me turn to Curtis McGrath. It is a spirit that is also encapsulated by the para-kayaker Curtis McGrath story. In August 2012, Sapper McGrath, a combat engineer in the Australian Army, was leading a team searching for IEDs in Afghanistan's Uruzgan province. He had been tasked to clear an unoccupied police checkpoint and missed an IED. He reportedly walked past it a number of times before finally sadly stepping on it, detonating it and immediately losing his legs and injuring his left wrist and hand. So that's in 2012. After losing his legs, he undertook a rigorous rehabilitation regime, including 6 hours of physiotherapy every day, with the initial aim of simply getting back onto his prosthetic feet. He then decided to aim a little higher, and in just 8 months after first picking up a paddle, McGrath won gold in the 200 canoe at the 2014 World Championships in Moscow. That's 2014. He then backed it up at Rio, winning Australia the gold medal in para-canoeing KL2. These are just a couple of the highlights of the Games, which depend not just on the success of winning a medal, but overcoming serious hurdles to get there. Mr Deputy President, it's great that we're doing this motion today because the Paralympians arrived home in Sydney this morning, and it's great that this House was able to acknowledge their success and their contribution to our nation on the day of their triumphant return. Overall, Australia as a nation pulled its fair share of wins, as we did in London in 2012. Our athletes brought home 22 gold medals and a medal tally of 81, which saw us place 5th overall behind countries with significantly larger populations, including China, Great Britain and the United States. We performed well across a broad range of events, including track, cycling, swimming, para-athletics, as well as team sports like wheelchair rugby. The team touched down at Sydney Airport, as I said this morning, and fans are invited to a special welcome home celebration on Tuesday the 4th of October to congratulate the team on their achievements in Martin Place at lunchtime. But the Paralympics isn't just about bringing home gold for your respective countries. It plays a vital role for those living with a disability around the world. Not only does it play a social role, one where those with a disability can see what is possible even with overwhelming constraints, but also plays a technological role. Paralympic sports evolved from medical rehabilitation programs in the 1950s. The objective of a rehabilitation program is to regain a level of function for the client, for the person. For an athlete with a disability, the highest expression of this return to function is to compete as at an elite level in the Paralympic Games. The relentless desire to return to function has been at the heart of the ethos of the Paralympics since it first started. The first Paralympians were no different to Katie Kelly or Curtis McGrath. In fact, war and injuries sustained in the battlefields of World War II have a lot to do with how the Paralympics evolved and came to be. The first internationally significant gathering of the Paralympians was in 1948. Organised by Jewish German-born Dr. Ludwig Gutmann, a refugee from Nazi Germany, was hosted as a sports competition for the British World War II veterans with spinal cord injuries. These games would be called the 1948 International Wheelchair Games and were intended to coincide with the 1948 Olympics. Dr. Gutmann's aim was always to create an elite sports competition for people with disabilities that would be comparable to the Olympic Games. In 1952, Dutch and Israeli veterans joined the British contingent. 8 years later, in 1960, the first official Paralympic Games, not restricted to war veterans, was held in Rome. Following the consistent growth of the event, the International Paralympic Committee, IPC, was established in 1988 to administer the Games, not that long ago, 1988. The IPC, quite rightly, does not shy away from what it sees as its vision for para-athletes. They see their goals as follows: enable, creating conditions for athlete empowerment. Para-athletes, the primary focus from initiation to elite level. Achieve, sporting excellence is the goal of a sports-centred organisation. Inspire and excite, touch the heart of all people for a more equitable society. Through sport, the IPC's core idea is that para-athletics challenges stereotypes and transforms attitudes, helping to increase inclusion by breaking down social barriers and discrimination towards people with impairment. Very noble goals. The Australian experience of the Paralympics that I have outlined this afternoon above certainly suggests that we are well on our way to achieving this in our country. Let me turn to the technology, which I think is an important aspect. There's another interesting take on what the Paralympics represent, and that is the question about our relationship as humans with technology. To satisfy the demands of elite athletes, significant new technological developments in wheelchair design, prosthetics, wheelchair design and prosthesis has occurred, demonstrated by radical equipment design such as the seated throwing chairs, racing wheelchairs and the running prosthesis. As technological advances continue to provide opportunities for improved athletic performance, an ongoing challenge for international sporting bodies is to determine if the use of given technology presents performance enhancement, or rather is essential for their performance. Paralympics is said to be where technology fuses with the human form. In a world where sport is constantly marred and muddled by the question of doping and performance-enhancing drugs, the Paralympics represents an alternative model and raises a different sort of question. It's a question being asked by Professor Michellie, Jr., who has written a soon-to-be-released book, The Edge, The War Against Cheating and Corruption in the Cutthroat World of Elite Sports, which points out that sporting bodies really haven't begun to grapple with the future of technology. He points out that Paralympians have not only overcome their adversity to return to function or to lead normal, quote-unquote, athletic lives, but have in fact started to exceed the feats of able-bodied athletes. Some are doing superhuman things. Michellie Jr. thinks, and it is possible that he's right, that in the future people are going to tune into the Paralympics to see humans doing things that you just don't see at the Olympics. As he says in a recent article, quote, they will run faster, they will jump further, and they will do incredible things because that is the place technology fuses with human form. It's in many ways a reflection of the rest of society, where we continue to make technological advances at a blistering pace. I don't think it's also too much of a stretch to suggest that the technological advances being made in assistive devices such as wheelchairs and prosthetics are also making their way into the consumer markets from the elite sports. We need to push the boundaries of the Paralympics, not just for the sake of the sporting spectacle, but so that those advances made in the elite field of athletics find their way into the hands of those who are less fortunate in their athletic ability. But we'll also need assistance to live out their daily lives with a healthy level of physical activity. The rise of the Paralympics goes to the heart of the kind of society or the kind of humanity we want to see going forward. Do we want a society where people, not only elite athletes but young kids growing up with disabilities across our state, can use the latest technology to overcome their physical limitations and compete with their able-bodied friends, as I said at the beginning of my speech, on the sports fields at lunchtime and on the cricket field on the Saturday morning? I think, Mr Deputy President, we absolutely do. So I commend this motion to the House. I congratulate Katie and Michellie and the entire team for their success, and I wanted to highlight the broader opportunity that the Paralympics provides for our society going forward. I really congratulate the team.